All right, let's talk about this Jimmy Kimmel situation because it's one of the craziest, most revealing things I've seen in a while. I didn't even catch it at first because, honestly, I was off grid. I was out in the mountains hunting elk, no service, no Twitter, no nothing. And I come back and people are like, dude, did you hear about Kimmel getting suspended by ABC? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Suspended for telling a joke from his own late night show? That sounded so insane that at first I thought it was some Onion headline. But no, turns out it actually happened. ABC pulled Jimmy Kimmel off the air supposedly indefinitely after his comments about the Charlie Kirk situation blew up. And then on top of that, you had the FCC chairman, a guy literally appointed by Trump, going on a podcast basically threatening ABC. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Dude, that's not a regulator. That's Tony Soprano. That's Vito Corleone. That's not how the government is supposed to talk to media companies. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to like Kimmel. You don't have to like his jokes. You don't even have to think he's funny. I've disagreed with him plenty. I've criticized some of his jokes myself, especially when he went after, unvaccinated people or when he was cheering about Tucker Carlson losing his job. That stuff, I think, is kind of mean-spirited. But none of that matters. The point is, he's a comedian. He's supposed to push buttons. He's supposed to say shit that makes people laugh and sometimes pisses people off. That's the gig. And the second you let the government, not the audience, not advertisers, not ratings, but the government step in and say, nope, you can't say that. We're going to pressure the network to pull you off the air. You're in really dangerous territory. That's not America. That's not free speech. That's some authoritarian bullshit. And it doesn't matter that it's happening to Kimmel right now, because once that door is open, it's going to swing the other way too. And you know what's crazy? Some people on the right were celebrating this. Like, finally, he went after us. He insulted conservatives. Now he's getting what he deserves. Dude, you're out of your mind if you think that's a win. That's not a win for you. That's a loss for everybody. Because if you cheer for the government censoring someone else's speech today, don't cry tomorrow when they censor yours. And they will. It's inevitable. That's how this game always plays out. Now, fast forward a week, Kimmel comes back. They put him back on TV. And you got to give the guy credit. He handled it. He comes out. He does this monologue where he's dressed like a bear next to Guillermo in a banana suit. So right away, he's still being funny. He's still doing the show. But then he sits down and he speaks from the heart. He literally says, it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. His voice cracked. You could hear him getting emotional. And that's real. That's not some focus group bullshit. That's a guy saying, hey, look, I made a joke. I upset people. That wasn't my intention. I get why you're mad. That's powerful. That's what you want. That's what free speech looks like. Not everyone's going to love it. Not everyone's going to forgive him, but at least you got to stand there and say it. And what I thought was really smart was how he balanced it. He didn't turn it into a partisan rant. He didn't go up there and just bash Republicans for 20 minutes. He said thank you to the people who defended him, even the ones who don't like him politically. Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul. People you'd never expect to be in Jimmy Kimmel's corner. They came out and said, hey, this is wrong. You can't have the government shutting down a comedian. And Kimmel acknowledged that. He even mentioned me by name, which, hey, thanks, Jimmy. But the bigger thing is, he found some common ground. He said, maybe the silver lining is we found one thing we can all agree on. Let's stop letting these politicians tell us what they want and start telling them what we want. That's exactly it. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. It's not about left versus right. It's about the people versus the politicians. It's about freedom versus control. And you could tell he was pissed at his bosses, too. He flat out said he didn't agree with ABC pulling him off the air. He told them that. But he also admitted he gets the position they're in. Because, look, Disney owns ABC. Disney's a giant corporation. They've got shareholders. They've got government contracts. They've got theme parks. They've got all this stuff going on. And when the FCC chairman is out there basically threatening them with regulatory action, that's real pressure. That's not just some tweets. That's billions of dollars on the line. And Kimmel, to his credit, said this puts them at risk. And it's still messy because even though he's back, there are still affiliates, Nexstar, Sinclair, that refuse to air a show. That's like 20% of the country. So it's not like everything's back to normal. It's not like you just flip the switch and everything's fine. No, this is still an open wound. But the bigger story is this. He got to come back. He got to speak. He got to defend himself. He got to make people laugh and also make people think. And that's what the whole thing should have been about in the first place. Meanwhile, Trump's out there mocking his ratings, saying he had no ratings, and Kimmel just fires back on air, I do tonight. That's funny. That's the way it should be. Politicians take shots, comedians take shots back, the audience laughs, we all move on. That's the game. That's the dance. That's democracy with a sense of humor. Here's the thing that really fries my brain about this whole Kimmel situation, the sheer hypocrisy. Doesn't matter what side you're on, left or right, people will cheer censorship when it benefits them. Every time. It's like some weird tribal instinct. When a conservative voice gets deplatformed, you see folks on the left going, ha, good, finally. They shut him up. And then when it's somebody like Kimmel getting targeted, you've got people on the right going, yeah, cancel him, he deserves it. Dude, that's the same play. It's the same bullshit tactic, just in a different uniform. And people fall for it every time. And I'm sitting here like, how do you not see this? How do you not realize that when you cheer for the government or a giant corporation to censor somebody, you're just building the weapon that's going to be used against you later? It's inevitable. You're literally asking for a leash around your own neck. The second you're not in power, that same tool is going to be pointed at you. That's why you don't want it to exist in the first place. Free speech only means something if it applies to everyone, including people you don't like. That's the whole point. Otherwise, it's just speech I like is allowed, speech I don't like gets banned, and that's not freedom. That's just majority rule tyranny with a smiley face slapped on it. And let's not pretend this is just about the government either. ABC and Disney, they're massive corporations. These companies don't care about free speech. They care about money, they care about shareholders, they care about avoiding lawsuits and government fines. So when somebody like Brendan Carr, head of the FCC, comes out and basically says, change your behavior or there's going to be trouble, you bet your ass they listen. They don't want to fight that. They don't want to risk billions of dollars. They'll throw Jimmy Kimmel under the bus in 2 seconds if it means protecting the bottom line. That's another layer people don't talk about enough. Corporate cowardice. It's not just government censorship. It's corporate self-censorship. These companies preemptively shut down voices because they don't want to deal with backlash. They don't want to deal with regulators breathing down their neck. And that creates this weird chilling effect where everyone's looking over their shoulder before they speak. Imagine being a comedian and thinking, okay, if I make this joke tonight, not only might people get mad on Twitter, but my network might pull me off the air because they're scared of the FCC. That's insane. That kills comedy before it even has a chance to exist. You can't be funny if you're constantly self-censoring. The best jokes come from saying the thing you're not supposed to say. That's the juice. That's the whole art form. Now, this is personal for me too, man, because I've lived through versions of this. I've had people try to cancel me, try to pressure Spotify to drop my show, all that noise. During COVID especially, when I had doctors on talking about alternative treatments, questioning the official narrative, people lost their minds. Big-name musicians pulled their music from Spotify in protest. Politicians were out there saying I was dangerous, I was spreading misinformation, and Spotify was under insane pressure. And look, did I say everything perfectly? No. Did I get some things wrong? Yeah, absolutely. But that's what conversations are. That's what podcasts are. You talk, you explore, you push back, you try to figure things out. It's not scripted, it's not polished, it's not a news broadcast, and yet the calls were silence him, deplatform him, shut him down. But here's what Spotify did right, in my opinion. They didn't fold. They didn't drop me. They put up some disclaimers. They did some PR damage control, but they didn't cancel the show. And their CEO even put out a letter saying, we believe in supporting creator expression. And that's the difference. That's why I'm still here, still talking, still doing this podcast. Compare that to what Disney and ABC did to Kimmel. They folded. They yanked him off the air indefinitely just to protect themselves. And only after the blowback, only after people across the spectrum said, hey, this is bullshit, did they let him come back. And to me, that shows you how fragile the system is. And These giant corporations don't stand on principle. They stand on whatever keeps the money flowing and the government happy. And that's why what Kimmel said in his return monologue actually mattered. When he told the audience, this show's not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this that's real. That's the truth. Because the second you can't have a show like that, the second comedians can't speak freely, we're done. We're no different than some authoritarian regime where the government dictates what's funny and what isn't. And I also respected that he called out Disney, his own bosses. That takes balls. He literally said he didn't agree with being pulled off the air, and he told them that directly. Most people in his position would just come back, smile, read the teleprompter, pretend nothing happened. He didn't do that. He said what everyone was thinking, this was wrong. And that gives me a little more respect for the guy. But it also shows how messed up the situation still is. Because even with him back on ABC, you've got affiliates like Nexstar and Sinclair refusing to air his show. That's 20% of the country gone. And just like that. So the chilling effect is still there. The punishment is still there. And that means the message is still clear. If you piss off the wrong people, your platform can vanish overnight. And again, this is why I don't understand people celebrating this. Like, what's the win? You don't like Jimmy Kimmel? Fine. Don't watch his show. Change the channel. That's the beauty of free speech. You get to choose. But pushing for him to be silenced, pushing for the government to intervene, that's not a victory. That's just handing more power to the very institutions that will gladly turn around and silence you next. So when I saw Kimmel thank his allies on the right people, like Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, I thought, yes, that's how it's supposed to work. You don't have to agree with everything a guy says to defend his right to say it. You can hate Jimmy Kimmel's guts and still stand up and say, no, the government doesn't get to cancel comedians. That's the whole deal. That's what free speech actually means. And the fact that Kimmel acknowledged that, the fact that he said, maybe this is one thing we can all agree on, that's the silver lining here. Because if there's one thing that should unite everybody, regardless of politics, it's the idea that you can make a joke on television without worrying about government regulators pulling the plug. You know what this whole Jimmy Kimmel thing reminds me of? It's the same pattern you see all through history. Governments, powerful institutions, they always try to control speech. Always. It's not new. The only thing that changes is the excuse they use. Sometimes it's protecting morality. Sometimes it's protecting the children. Sometimes it's national security. And now it's misinformation or disinformation, whatever the label. The goal is always the same. Keep people from saying things that make the powerful uncomfortable. That's it. That's the game. And comedy's always been in the crosshairs because comedians are dangerous, man. They cut through the bullshit. They say the quiet part out loud. They make people laugh at things they're not supposed to laugh at. That's why in dictatorships, comedians get locked up or worse because humor undermines authority. You can't be a scary authoritarian if people are laughing at you. That's why I get so fired up about this. It's not just about one guy, Jimmy Kimmel, getting pulled off TV for a week. It's about the bigger principle. Do we want to live in a world where comedians have to check with the government before they do a monologue? Do we want to live in a country where you can't poke fun at politicians without worrying about your network losing its license? Because if we go down that road, it doesn't end well. It never does. And I know some people roll their eyes when I go off on this, but man, the lizard people, the metaphorical ones, the elites, the people behind the curtain, they love this shit. They love when we censor ourselves. They don't even have to do anything. They just sit back and watch us turn on each other. Left versus right, red versus blue, fighting over who gets to cancel who while they consolidate power. It's perfect for them. Think about it. If you're one of those people who really runs things, you don't want free speech. Free speech means people can criticize you, they can call out your bullshit, they can organize, they can resist. You want people divided, silenced, scared. And what better way to do that than to convince them to cheer for censorship as long as it's aimed at their enemies? That's genius level control. That's lizard people sitting around a conference table rubbing their hands together level shit. Now, look at comedy in America right now. Dave Chappelle, one of the greatest to ever do it. He's been targeted over and over for his jokes. Netflix employees walking out, people demanding his specials get pulled, endless think pieces about how dangerous he is. But guess what? The guy's selling out arenas. People want to hear him. They want the truth wrapped in jokes. And the fact that the establishment keeps trying to muzzle him only proves how important it is that he keeps talking. Same with Kimmel. Again, I'm not comparing their styles. They're very different comics, but the principle's the same. When you see the government or corporation stepping in to control what a comedian can say, that's when you know the comedian is hitting a nerve. Because if the jokes were really meaningless, nobody would care. If Kimmel's ratings were as bad as Trump says, if nobody was watching, why bother suspending him? Why bother threatening ABC? The fact that they did shows you the joke landed. It struck a chord. And here's another thing people forget. Comedy evolves through controversy. Some of the best, most memorable bits in history are the ones that piss people off at the time. George Carlin's 7 Dirty Words. Lenny Bruce literally got arrested for obscenity. Richard Pryor talking about race in ways that made white audiences squirm. All of that was controversial. All of that was offensive to someone. And now those guys are legends. So when I see people clutching their pearls over Kimmel, making an inaccurate setup line about Charlie Kirk, I just shake my head. Like, do you understand comedy? Do you understand that exaggeration, misdirection, sometimes even bullshit is part of how you get to the punchline? If you demanded perfect accuracy from comedians, stand-up wouldn't even exist. Late-night monologues wouldn't exist. You just have C-SPAN with a laugh track. And the crazy part is, Kimmel's joke wasn't even the end of the world. He didn't stand up there and call for violence. He didn't tell people to storm buildings. He made a joke that pissed off some folks, and then he moved on. That's the normal cycle. People get mad, people clap back, maybe he apologizes, maybe he doesn't, then the next news cycle hits. That's how it's supposed to go. But instead, we got the government stepping in. That's the part that breaks the pattern, and that's the part that should freak everyone out. Because once regulators get a taste of that power, we can pressure networks to silence people we don't like, they're going to use it again and again and again. So when Kimmel came back and said, this show isn't important, what's important is that we live in a country that allows us to have a show like this. I thought, yeah, he's right. He nailed it. The show itself doesn't matter. The ratings don't matter. What matters is the principle, the freedom. Because without that, the show doesn't even get to exist in the first place. And honestly, maybe that's the silver lining. Maybe the fact that people from totally different political camps, me, Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, all stood up and said, no, this is wrong. Maybe that's the thing we needed. Maybe that's the reminder that, okay, we're going to fight about everything else. We're going to disagree about taxes, immigration, healthcare, whatever. But at the very least, we can agree that comedians should be free to tell jokes without government interference. Because if we can't agree on that, then what the hell are we even doing? So where does this all leave us? What's the takeaway from Jimmy Kimmel getting suspended, coming back, giving that emotional monologue, and the whole circus around it? For me, the lesson is simple. We cannot let politicians or corporations decide what's funny and what isn't, period. That's the line. Because once you give them that power, once you let them silence somebody because you personally don't like what he said, you've just handed them the keys to your own voice. And I've lived this. I know what it's like to be at the center of that storm. Remember when the whole COVID thing blew up and people were losing their minds about my podcast? I had on doctors, I had on scientists, people with real credentials, and we were just talking, not issuing decrees, not handing out prescriptions, just talking. And the mob went insane. Deplatform him, cancel him, kick him off Spotify. You had Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, a bunch of other artists yanking their music in protest, politicians making statements, articles every damn day calling me dangerous. Now, I didn't agree with everything my guest said. Sometimes I pushed back. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I got things wrong. But that's the nature of conversation. And the calls weren't to challenge me with better arguments. They weren't to debate me. They were to silence me. That's always the move. Shut them up. And Spotify was under insane pressure, like billions on the line pressure. And they had a choice. They could have cut me loose, thrown me under the bus the way Disney threw Kimmel under the bus. But they didn't. They stood by me. They put up some disclaimers, whatever, but they didn't cancel the show. And that's why I'm still here. That's why we're talking right now. Now compare that to what ABC did. The second the heat got turned up, they folded. They suspended Kimmel indefinitely. And, they didn't want to, you could tell from the way Kimmel talked about it when he came back, but they did it anyway because they were scared. Scared of losing advertisers, scared of losing affiliates, scared of getting smacked around by the FCC. And that's the real danger when corporations act as enforcers for political power, because then it's not just the government you got to worry about. It's your boss, it's your platform, it's the people signing the checks. They don't care about principles. They care about keeping the money flowing. And that means the path of least resistance is always going to be shutting you up. That's why what Kimmel did on his first night back actually mattered. He didn't just crack jokes and move on. He addressed it head on. He apologized to people who felt hurt sincerely, I thought, but he also stood up for himself. He said it wasn't right that he got pulled. He said the show's not important, but the fact we can have a show like this is important. That's the whole ballgame right there. And then he thanked people across the spectrum, Shapiro, Cruz, Rand Paul, me, for having his back. Think about how rare that is. In today's climate, when's the last time you saw people from opposite ends of the political universe agree on anything? They can't even agree on what day it is. And yet here they were all saying, no, this is wrong. The government shouldn't be silencing comedians. That's huge. Now, are we all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya after this? Of course not. We're still going to argue about everything else under the Sunday. But if there's one thing that should unite people in a free society, it's this: the right to speak freely, the right to joke, the right to offend, the right to say something dumb, and the right to come back the next night and do it again. Because the alternative is terrifying. The alternative is a world where every word is monitored, where jokes are vetted by committees, where comedians become propagandists. And once that happens, comedy's dead, art's dead, free thought's dead. And you don't get that back easily. People think it can't happen here. They think America's somehow immune. But go crack a history book. Free societies crumble all the time when they let fear justify censorship. It starts small, always. Just one guy. Just one joke. It's not a big deal. But once the precedent is set, it grows. And by the time people realize what they've lost, it's too late. That's why this moment matters more than just one late-night host. It's not about whether you like Jimmy Kimmel. It's not about whether you think his joke was funny or accurate. It's about the principle. If the government can pressure ABC to pull him, they can pressure anyone. They can pressure me. They can pressure you. They can pressure whoever they want. And once that tool exists, it will be used. So, yeah, I might not agree with everything Kimmel says. Hell, I've criticized him before. I'll criticize him again. But I'll defend his right to tell jokes without government interference every single time. Because if we don't, then none of us have that right. And maybe that's the silver lining, like he said. Maybe the one good thing that came out of this mess is a reminder that free speech isn't a left issue or a right issue. It's an everyone issue. It's the foundation that lets us fight about all the other issues. Without it, the whole system collapses. So here's my message. Don't cheer for censorship just because it hits someone you don't like. Don't hand more power to the very people who already have too much of it. Stand up for free speech, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy, even when it's Jimmy Kimmel, especially then, because once you lose it, once you let it slip, the lizard people, the real power players, the elites, whatever you want to call them, they win. They get exactly what they want. A divided, silenced, obedient population. And the only way to stop that is to say no, loudly, consistently, across the board. So, I was in the mountains. I missed the first part of this drama, but I'm glad I caught the ending. I'm glad Kimmel came back. I'm glad he spoke from the heart, and I'm glad people across the spectrum defended his right to do it. That gives me some hope. Because at the end of the day, comedy is supposed to be dangerous. It's supposed to be edgy. It's supposed to be offensive sometimes. It's supposed to make you laugh and squirm at the same time. If it's safe, if it's sanitized, if it's government approved, then it's not comedy. It's propaganda with a laugh track. And I don't want to live in that world. So keep telling jokes, keep speaking your mind, and don't ever let anyone, not the government, not a corporation, not a mob on Twitter, tell you that you can't